Welcome into Bet the Edge. I'm Brad Thomas here with Vaughn Delzell and Eric Froton, and this is the College Football Playoff Show presented by BetMGM Sportsbooks. Fellas, the quarterfinals delivered. I don't care what you say. I don't care if you're upset about the seeding. How could you not be excited about more football, more high-level football? Vaughn, first takeaway, and we'll get to the games in a second. We're recording this a day late because of the postponement of the Sugar Bowl, but I just want like a takeaway of the overall playoffs so far.
I mean, I've loved it. I mean, people complain that there's too many blowouts and the structure of it and everything like that. The only negative, the only takeaway I would say that I would change is the path to the number one seed. The Oregon Ducks, a lot of people would say, did not have a fair battle, a fair shot with Ohio State up in the next round. But at the same time, you are dealt the cards you're dealt, and you got to win there on out. And they did not do that, and that was a revenge spot for Ohio State. But I thought all the games were exciting. Arizona State may have saved the format in some people's opinions, keeping that game close, because it looked certainly after the first quarter like it was going to be a blowout. But I absolutely loved it. I had a great week last week, gentlemen. And the only thing I'd like to say is Georgia Bulldogs absolutely let me down. I pulled up to the NBC studio ready to do the Penn State Northwestern basketball game. Saw it was 3-3 at halftime. Georgia would have swept me last week for the show, 6-0. But better yet, gentlemen, it would have cashed a $25 to win $1,700 parlay. And Georgia blows it. And guess who's let me hear about the whole night? Jordan Cornette, Notre Dame alum, 6'10" shot blocker from the Fighting Irish, who now works for NBC.
Oh, my God.
Couldn't be a worse night. So loved it all up until that, Brad.
Eric, big picture. What do you love? What do you hate? What would you change about the college football playoffs?
Yeah, I think this opened up the conversation about the seeding, and Vaughn had alluded to it a little bit, and it's, do we give these top seeds away to conference winners, or do we go by the previous model and take the top 4 teams to get those buys? I think that's really what has come out here, and also, it brought out the buys itself. Didn't really help any of the teams who got the buys, and that it started up another conversation, which is relevant, which is, does that week off do you any good? It's kind of the inverse of the conversation you'd have in the NFL, where it's like the bye is everything and you get the home court field advantage, and it's a distinct sort of an advantage, but it didn't appear to be so in the college football playoff during our first year of the expanded 12-team format.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think, it's a work in progress. The buys were weird. The automatic seeding 1 through 4 was pretty weird for conference champions. I was one of the advocates that, whatever happened in college football playoff expansion, we weren't going to be satisfied, right? We needed more teams and we'd get a worse product. I've changed my tune, and I genuinely believe that more teams make for a more compelling story. I literally had popcorns from round 1 all the way so far up to the semifinals, even in the blowouts. I had that sense of anxiety, and Alabama's not in the playoffs, right? Like, I had anxiety for the games I was going to watch. I had anxiety for my friends' teams where they went to college. I had anxiety for the bets that I placed. You don't get that with the 14 playoff. Well, you do, but it's such a short window of time. Yeah. I love the college football playoffs. I actually really like the Notre Dame-Georgia game. Let's get into that. Notre Dame won 23-10. Okay, go ahead. Good.
How about conference champions? How about none of the conference champions making it this far either? I mean, That was also a big conversation point too when we were talking about playoff seeding. So where does that rank entering next season? Like, how do you rank winning a conference championship compared to not winning one now? I think that's something that we have to talk about too, Brad.
Yeah, you actually made me think about something. I feel like we said this after the conference championship week when the conference championship games weren't all that great and compelling. And it really felt like the teams didn't care about winning a conference championship. It felt like all they cared about, for the majority of them, except for like the Boise States, right? The Arizona States, the ones who had to win to get in, the Clemsons. It felt like, especially in the SEC championship, the main goal is the national championship. An SEC championship is nice, but they don't remember how many SEC championships you have. They remember how many national championships you have. Look at Oregon, perfect season, derailed by Ohio State getting their revenge. I'm glad that you brought that up, because I totally forgot, like, they weren't great games, and now they're all ousted from the playoffs. But
speaking of ousted from the playoffs, the SEC itself, if it weren't for that non-targeting call in the ASU game, which, I mean, as everybody has seen during the post game, everybody going around the circle here with their opinions, that was a targeting call. That's been called a targeting call the entire season. Only because of the magnitude of the moment, it seems it was not called targeting, because clearly that safety went and launched and made contact. I mean, I don't know how you're going to get around that, but had it not been for that rules interpretation that was charitable towards Texas, we wouldn't have a single SEC team in this Final Four. So that's another element that I think needs to be parsed a little bit too, is all the elitism that we are fed by the SEC faithful about how wonderful they are and their 8-game regular season schedule because it's so tough. Well, if you didn't have a fortunate penalty call, or non-penalty call in your favor, there would be no SEC teams. So I do like seeing a little bit of the balance there, where we can't have the one overriding conference that has the elite sort of, feeling about themselves override the whole conversation. And that's what I do like about the 12 teams. But with the SEC not getting the amount of teams they want in, we might go to 14 or 16 very soon. So a lot of things still left to shake out from this first college football playoff.
And I was one of the people too that said, like, I want more SEC teams in. I figure we can get one in over SMU or Clemson. Indiana, I love their story. I knew they were going to be in, but I still thought an SEC team would have been more competitive in that position. But people are overreacting too to what the SEC has done outside of the college football playoff too, like the Alabama, for example, because a lot of those guys were opting out, and a lot of those guys were not as excited, you could say, to play in that game opposed to the college football playoff. So I still do think the SEC would have showed up to some degree, but this was a bad showing for them. And I think revenge next season will be on the menu for that conference.
Yeah, I feel like that's, you could look at it both ways. SEC maybe a bad showing. Georgia playing with a backup quarterback against a team that's not the number 7 team in the country. It's like the same argument that can be made. Like if Ohio State was from a different conference, they played against Oregon. That's the Big Ten champion that gets eliminated. I mean, the Big Ten had 4 teams. They have 2 teams in now. It's the numbers game there. Vaughn, I do appreciate your statement there. From someone who is on the bowl selection committee, there's something that we look at when we look at teams and we pick them for the bowl games is the motivation, regardless of how good your college football team is. Motivation is always a factor when it comes to the postseason. When you look at teams like a South Carolina and Alabama, maybe not as highly motivated, right? Because their season could look like a disappointment. South Carolina, disappointed not to get in. Alabama, disappointed not to get in. It doesn't matter that Michigan was down 10 starters in that game. Alabama had their opt-outs as well. Yeah. It's about who's willing to play on that football field. And I just love actually the conversation about social media of how it kind of heightened the conversation. Like this conference deserved this conference. And this is the first time we're going to have a new winning head coach in quite some time. One of these head coaches will win college football playoffs for the first time. Actually, back-to-back years will be insane. But all right, guys, we've talked about this enough. I want to get into this game because I need to air my grievances. Notre Dame, Georgia. The reason we're recording late, I just want to get your takeaways from these playoff games just really quick before we get into the actual games that are coming up. Notre Dame, Georgia, I just want to ask each of you one question. I saw it everywhere on social media. Does the game play out differently if Carson Beck is under center? My answer is yes, but I've seen a lot of no's. I'll start with you, Eric.
I don't think so. Not quite the effect that would it be different? Yeah. I mean, obviously you'd be able to unleash that Georgia passing attack. They're ranked 122nd in standard down run rate. So this is under Mike Bobo, one of the more prolific passing offenses in the country. They simply could not go that route against Notre Dame. They tried to run the ball, obviously 29 carries for 62 yards, but simply they were one-dimensional, and putting the Stockton in the position of having to play the catch-up role, having to unleash more passes than he wants, was not particularly accurate downfield, was better in the, from 0 to 10 yards. Yes. Actually had some pretty good short area accuracy. It was a little more competent than I expected him to be. But at the end of the day, they simply could not mount an effective, consistent offense. And when they did, keep in mind, early on in that first half, they're all the way down, right around the 20-yard line. And this was early enough to really have an effect on the game. Crucial Travis Etienne fumble to Notre Dame really took a lot of wind out of their sails because they were able to move it a little bit early on. It did not. They were not able to be as consistent as they needed to in that second half. Notre Dame, without Riley Mills, without Jordan Botello, who was, their key pass rusher, he was injured early in the season. Didn't matter. We're still able to bottle up that Georgia run game. That's what it came down to for me.
Yeah, I mean, they still would have let up 17 points in 51 seconds, 54 seconds, whatever it was. It's still a lapse, unexplainable lapse from the Georgia Bulldogs. I don't think it would have mattered too much who was under center there. If Carson Beck was, he was very inconsistent at points with turnovers. So maybe, Brad, we see a different game just with different types of turnovers, right? But no, I still think that with that showing how the Georgia offense has played, I mean, Notre Dame was probably the right side the entire time. So,
but and I do want to be fair too. They were 2-15 in third and fourth down conversions. Georgia was so having an experienced QB in those third down situations certainly would have helped. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, I don't think it would have been enough to win the game. Though.
I was on Notre Dame. I didn't think this was a Georgia team that is as good as years past, especially with their inability to run the ball successfully. But it also helps when they're going to try to run the ball, even if you're undersized right there in the middle of the D line. You get a little of that help from the linebacking core, and they did a great job. Notre Dame. Don't want to take anything away from the Fighting Irish. Just quickly, let's touch on Ohio State, Oregon. Man, Buckeyes. They went from let's fire Ryan Day after the game to this man is going to win his first national championship. Jeremiah Smith can't cover him. Will Howard looked like one of the best quarterbacks I've seen. He did not look like the Kansas State Will Howard. Good for the Buckeyes. Bad news for Dan Lanning, right? They built this team to compete, didn't get off the bus. Just quick takeaways from the game. Start with you, Vaughn.
Ohio State, once again, back-to-back games coming out solely focused in the first quarter, absolutely dominating, getting multiple touchdowns in each game too. So we didn't see that from Ohio State against Nebraska, against Penn State, against Michigan, against Oregon early this season. But now we're seeing this dominance from the Buckeyes. So that is the main takeaway. And if they come out again, which will be a bet that I'll talk about, they come out again with that type of fire, they should be the winner this round as well against Texas.
Yeah, and with Ohio State, 500 total yards, and you go out and you drop a 41-21 beating. It was 34-0 in the first half. They came out right out of the gate and just blitzkrieged them. When a 20-point loss, with Oregon, it was more than a 30-35 point loss. Frankly, and it was a clean game too. Only two penalties out of Ohio State and only 3 penalties out of Oregon, no turnovers. It was just a straight across the board thrashing by Ohio State, as clean a blowout as you're going to get in these sort of a big time environment.
Yeah. Shout out to Jeremiah Smith for cashing the any wide receiver 150 plus yards plus 400. We cashed that before the semifinals. Texas, Arizona State. This is a question I have for this game. Were you more impressed with Arizona State or more disappointed in Texas? Eric, you go first.
I think I was more impressed with Arizona State. I guess I would say, obviously, the Cameron Scadaboo from Sacramento State to Arizona State, last year. And gosh, that was really one of the biggest coming out parties for an NFL draft prospect in a while. Because, Scadaboo was great all year, but the rank and file college football person didn't understand just how good contact balance was, toughness, grit. I really think that the way, and Sam Levitt too, quarterback Sam Levitt. I mean, I would think his Heisman odds have gone up because he looked incredible. He did everything you could ask of him after being in a hole early to be able to pull that team out, and he cashed our 10.5 rushing yards over. So we appreciate that too, Mr. Levitt. And
he cashed the under 0.5 passing touchdowns as well. For plus 168. So I absolutely love that one for me. But yeah, Brad, it's an interesting question because I came away impressed with both teams, but I was most impressed with Texas on 4th and 13, scoring that touchdown overtime, being down, lost every single ounce, every atom, every molecule of the momentum in this game. And they score and they turn around and score on the next possession on the very first play. that is a type of mentality that does win you games and keeps you close and should not make you a touchdown underdog despite blowing the game, in my opinion. But I was the most impressed with that. But Arizona State's rally, I mean, from a running back, pretty much. I mean, oh man. But yeah, I mean, quarterback too, Eric. I mean, the amount of scrambling, Jalen Miro type stuff right there.
Yeah.
Right?
Dillingham should have been coach of the year, in my opinion. I was disappointed in Sarkisian. Why are you throwing the ball there to end the game? You want him to have 0 timeouts. Ideal world, you're kicking the field goal with zeros going through the clock. Just kind of overthinking it, I would say. Last but not least, the Fiesta Bowl, Penn State, Boise State. Penn State just showed they have elite run defense. I think that's what we talked about on the show. They're still my national champion pick, so I know we'll talk about that. Take away, Vaughn.
Yeah, I mean, Penn State did exactly what we thought they would do. You shut down Genty and you have a great chance to win. Tyler Warren, where were you at earlier, man, when I picked you to score 2 touchdowns or the first touchdown? But he looked amazing. His stock went up for the NFL draft. So Penn State looked exactly who we thought they were.
Yeah, complete domination by Penn State, especially on the line, as you mentioned. Boise State only runs for 2.7 yards per carry and commit 4 turnovers because Boise State hadn't really been put in a position where they were desperately trying to play catch-up. They'd always been close or ahead all season long, and we finally saw them in that trailing position. Simply could not handle that Penn State front, just getting overrun all game by that nasty front four.
Well, guys, I'm going to just run through these predictions real quick. Oregon over Penn State was mine, so I cannot win the national championship. But you guys do remember I have Penn State and Notre Dame futures, so I'm totally fine with that. Texas over Penn State. Vaughn's still alive. Eric, Notre Dame over Ohio State, still alive. You guys are bigger brains than me. Let's get into the semifinals. The Capital One Orange Bowl in Miami, Florida. Notre Dame, a 1.5-point favorite against Penn State. Total set at 46.5. This kicks off Thursday, January 9th at 7:30 p.m. This is totally unrelated, but I was trying to get a free room at the casino in Miami, and I was wondering why the heck they wouldn't give me a free room. The game is literally in Miami. I'm going to the game. What? I'm just going to go to the game. Oh, my God. I'm going to be in Miami. I'm just now realizing this. Go into the picks, Eric, and then I'll regroup and give my takes.
Yeah, I mean, if you're going to the game, I'm going to go try and see if I can get a media credential, Brad. We might have to bunk up again, buddy, just like Ohio State, Notre Dame, running it back. But, this is, I think this is going to be an extremely close game. We saw both of these teams really want to play at a slower pace. They didn't want to go out and air it out, guns blazing, like we saw Ohio State come out, not playing any games. A more subdued, methodical approach. Keep in mind with Notre Dame, they had less than 300 total yards against Georgia. They weren't blowing the scoreboard up. Riley Leonard only passed for 90 yards. This was a game that was won in the trenches and by Notre Dame's defense. On the other side, Penn State just bludgeoned Boise State, as we had talked about a little bit earlier. Drew Allard really didn't need to do much. It was only in the 170 range in terms of passing yardage. What I'm looking at on the props front, because we just got the props dropped on a few different domestics here. This is going to change, obviously, rapidly, maybe even by the time we post this. I can't believe we're getting a line on Jeremiah Love. He's at 58.5 rushing yards. Okay, 58.5 is what I'm seeing. And that's at BetMGM, I believe, right now. Guys, that's a big line. He came out of the game because he was injured. He was injured against USC, right? I was at that game. I watched him hurdle that USC defender, and then for the rest of the game, he gets banged up. It was Jadarian Price the whole time, and that's what happened the week before too.
Yep.
Right. Yeah. We saw Love have that big run, but then he only had 7 more carries the rest of the game. He didn't see much in that second half. He came out and has said that he's banged up. You're going to put him at 58. This is an early drop where they're really not accounting for that injury factor. I love the under 58.5 because of the injury factors. We don't know, and it's a short turnaround. They don't have 2 weeks to wait like they did later on in the season between then and the college football playoff starting.
And I think that's one of the biggest factors too in these games, because now you got this kind of short turnaround for a lot of these teams, which you're not used to as much. And it's really, neutral field. Some of these teams are banged up, and Jeremiah Love, I think that was one of the angles I wanted to talk about, Eric, because not many of the books I thought were going to post his line. I didn't think we were going to clear 50. especially as it probably a dual backfield. And then Riley Leonard obviously had a big game with his legs against Georgia. So
always does against the big game. Again, in the big games, they break out Riley Leonard. Yep, they do.
We know that he can't move the ball down the field like a natural Notre Dame quarterback should or would. So he's more of that dual threat run first quarterback. And I think that this game is also the over game of the two. Not saying that one game will go over, one game will go under, but I do see the ability for both these teams to score 3+ touchdowns here. And I think both these teams can move the ball on the ground routinely, and that's kind of the call to scoring here because both ground games are so dominant. But I think that Aller. I'm interested in his rushing prop again, Eric. 2-0 to the under. Notre Dame, a team that could get after him as well. So that's another angle.
Done well with the Aller under rushing yardage. We've done very well recently.
So
that's put him in the teens.
Yeah, and it probably will be. I'd say 12.5 probably since 2-0 under. We'd probably get 10.5 to 12.5.
Yeah,
but as far as the winner, Brad, I'm going to side with you here. I'm going to take Penn State. I'm assuming that's your side. I think they are the rightful side. I think they are the better team, but boy, overtime sprinkle here, so I'm probably worth it because this game is going to come down to the final possession, in my opinion. So, what say you?
Yeah, I'm on Penn State here, and when I was doing my little mental math, and as we get into these games, the further we get in, the more difficult they're going to be, right? To handicap, the lines are going to be sharper. They're not going to want to make mistakes, and the teams are just going to get better. But for me, the one biggest advantage or disadvantage is I do not believe that Notre Dame's going to have as much success stopping the run against Penn State as they did against Georgia. Notre Dame, best secondary in the country. We can go ahead and call that a spade. But if you want to find the weakness, and we're really, whatever it's called, picking hairs, splitting hairs, we're doing something to some hairs. Big difference. When we talk about success rate, first defensive success rate to the drop back, 64th to the run is Notre Dame. And then you look at EPA, first to the drop back and 9th to the run. This is a Penn State team that has success with two really good running backs. I saw the broadcast talk about the size of the two replacements in the middle there for Notre Dame and called them undersized against Georgia. I do want to give them their credit. They play with physicality. They played well in that game. The offensive line, starting offensive line for Penn State, 6'5", 319, 6'8", 314. The smallest guy on there is 6'5", 290. That's the smallest guy on their offensive line. I think they get some push, and it's not like they're playing against Gunnar Stockton, right? Drew Allar has progressively impressed, and take it from last year where the expectations were super lofty. He's gotten better. Drew Aller, he's gotten better, and he's shown poise. He's made the big throws. More importantly, he's targeted Tyler Warren. Warren has been the guy back out of the backfield, short passes, move the chains, even take some shots downfield with him. I think Penn State wins this game, but I don't think it's going to be a cakewalk by any means. But me getting plus money on their money line, well, granted, it's only plus 110. I still like Penn State to win this game. Still my national championship pick. I want to add one more thing. There's a big difference in having to turn around and play Notre Dame after playing Boise State or having to play Penn State after playing Georgia. That was a physical game, Notre Dame versus Georgia. We'll see if it takes a toll. Marcus Freeman has looked like a fantastic coach this season. I still side with the Nittany Lions. Eric, pick for this game.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Penn State as well. I have Notre Dame pre-playoff to play Ohio State in the national championship, but given the loss of Riley Mills, seeing what happens if they're playing Penn State in that defensive front, I don't know if they can be able to run the ball the way that they want to against Penn State's front. I will say Abdul Carter he put out a cryptic tweet. He was a little banged up. I think he's going to play. That's obviously huge with him and Dennis Sutton just collapsing pockets. They need to be able to run the ball with Notre Dame. They're not going to be able to throw the ball with kind of the frequency they want. They don't have the horses out there. Jordan Faison's the best guy they have clearly in their wide receiver core. But other than that, can Bo Collins win on the outside? Yeah. Mitchell Evans, maybe 3-4 targets a game. He's not Tyler Warren yet. I was hoping they'd use him more. They simply haven't. And they have a banged up Jeremiah Love. There's a lot of factors here that are going against Notre Dame.
Yeah.
I have to take Penn State, given the current situation we're looking at here. I'd love to have Notre Dame, make me look good from the preseason, but circumstances have changed. There have been injuries that are factors, and I got to go with the Nittany Lions.
I'll say this, Brad. I think the bigger battle for this team and the bigger differentiating, I think, factor in why Penn State would win this game is who could move the ball 20 yards down the field through the air. And that's Drew Aller, not Riley
Big
Leonard.
difference.
Yeah, and I feel like if you get in that position where Penn State gets a turnover early or they score early and go up a possession or two, you have Riley Leonard in a negative script. That's something that I don't want to be a part of rather than Penn State being down 7 to 14 points. I'd rather much feel more confident in Drew Aller leading that charge back and getting the ball down the field. So that's why I like Penn State ultimately too, I want to point out.
Yeah, I'd like to see what happens with Notre Dame playing from behind and whether or not they can do what they need to do and be able to do
it against
back.
you and I.
Yeah.
There's a big market difference too. You can find Notre Dame anywhere from a 2.5-point favorite to a dog on the money line in the market. There's no true market consensus yet. If you want to play both sides, the margins aren't thin enough in college football to play both sides where I'd advocate it. For NFL, yes. But yeah, I like Penn State, despite Notre Dame being 11-2-1 against the spread this season. Yeah, big stat there. Versus I think it was 8-7 for Penn State. Any other bets before we get into the next game?
I like the Love. That's the best one you're going to get on the board.
Yeah, Jeremiah Love's a fantastic one.
I would lean over on Faison. I think he's in that 35 range. Just in terms of what I've seen in the past few games, he's clearly the number one option in the passing game. And if they are down, if they are having to press, he's a clear over if they're any sort of chase position.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's been the man. They've desperately looked for the man. Looks like they found him 2 weeks ago, and they wrote him again last week. I think he had like 4 carries, went over his 30, 4 receptions, went over his 30 mark in that game as well. All right, before we get into the Cotton Bowl, I want to let you know conference play heats up on the hardwood as we enter the new year. Catch a Big East showdown this Sunday when Providence takes on 2-time defending national champion UConn at 2 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. The Goodyear Cotton Bowl. Wow. Arlington, Texas. Ohio State, 6.5-point favorite. Texas Longhorns coming in this, basically playing close to home. Total set at 53.5. This is Friday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern. I'll go with you, Eric. Give me your thoughts, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is a game that we've been waiting for all season long. I don't think that's a particularly hot take. I mean, I'm very excited about it. 2 offenses that can go, 2 defenses that can shut it down, especially that Texas pass defense, obviously.
Yeah.
But what I really looked at when I started capping this is I want to focus on Ohio State, and not so much the offense as we might expect, but actually the defense, because we're trying to project these props, and we got a few out here. What do they do well, and what have they done the last month extremely well? It's pick one thing that the other team does that Jim Knowles, the vaunted defensive coordinator for Ohio State, picks and says, we can shut this down and make this team one-dimensional. It's exactly what they go for. If you look at Oregon, right? Negative 23 rushing yards. Snuffed it out. I mean, that front 4 was vicious all game long. Tennessee, 108 passing yards. That's all they went for. And they were down the entire game. Nika only threw for 108, and they're in a heavy chase script the whole time. Tells you something. Michigan, 63 passing yards. Yeah, Michigan won. Totally understand. They only scored 13 points. It wasn't the defense's fault. It was the offense's fault, that didn't execute. And frankly, poor play calling. Only throwing the ball to Jeremiah Smith twice in the second half. What are you doing? Are you kidding me?
Dude's a star.
On your team.
Dude is a star.
He is. It doesn't make any sense to me. And then Indiana, they just shut it all down on Indiana. They only had 151 total yards the entire game. This is a playoff caliber team, Indiana. That didn't work out so well, right, for them. So, I mean, they've just been defensively smothering, right? And where I think that comes into play is Texas. They're okay on the ground, like 61st in success rate, whatever have you, 98th in yards per contact, 87th in yards per successful rush. Texas, they're going to be able to run the ball against Ohio State, against that front? I don't think so. I think that's what Jim Knowles is going to look to do. I think he's going to look and say, all right, I can shut down Wisner. You got a banged up offensive line. You saw Kelvin Banks having ankle problems. Their left tackle, first round pick. Williams on the other side didn't play last game, their right tackle. And they're going to be dealing with Ohio State's front four. We saw what happened to Oregon. That's a bad recipe for me. I think you're going to see a lot more throwing out of Texas. I don't think you're going to see much rushing. I'm going under 64.5 rushing yards for Trey Wisner. I'm going over his 16.5 receiving yards. All right. Texas throws to running backs 22.1% of their attempts. That is 16th most in the FBS. For his part, Wisner, 46 targets in the regular season. That's second among all SEC running backs. Clearly, he is playing. He is the nominal number one. He's going to get plenty of targets because I don't see that being a case where they're just going to bully ball their way over Ohio State.
So, I thought this was a compelling matchup. Probably one of my favorite matchups that we're going to get in this college football playoffs. Two defenses really good. Ohio State allowing 12 points per game, Texas 14.5 points per game. And I think stylistically they can match up pretty well on, like what you said, Eric, eliminating the main thing, right? Texas, this is going to be the best pass rush that Ohio State has played all season, at least per PFF. The best pass rush in college football playoffs remaining is Texas. And then Ohio State, this is going to be the best run defense that Texas has played in this postseason, which is going to be a really compelling matchup. It kind of led me to look at Quinn Ewers. I think he goes over his 234. The number's really low, right? Like it's really low. It's concerningly low. But there's one bet that I just can't get away from, guys. And I just can't stop betting Jeremiah Smith. Last game, I bet him 2 touchdowns, 1 touchdown. I bet his yards, 100 plus yards. I bet him in a non-conventional way where I'm going to do the same thing this time. 60 plus receiving yards, Ohio State money line. First, I think this Buckeyes team wins this game. If you're going to be Texas, if you're going to be Ohio State and you're going to eliminate the run, Jim Knowles has made this so impressive where he has not disguised his game plan. When he played against Tennessee, he knew there was a young, inexperienced quarterback under center. He sent pressure. It also helped that you're getting to the pressure with JT Talimoyu and Jack Sawyer. That helps with just those two beasts. But he sent pressure, didn't disguise it. He had that mentality of, I want you to know we're putting pressure in your face. I think he's going to try to do the same thing with Quinn Ewers, not because I think Quinn Ewers is this inexperienced quarterback, but I think the decision-making of Quinn Ewers has been questionable. The touch on some of his passes has been questionable. And that's where you create those situations where you get turnovers or you get long down in distances, which is more advantageous for your team. So Ohio State team under Jim Knowles has been playing great defense. I mean, they even played really good defense against Michigan in the game that they lost, but they were unable to move the ball effectively. Give me Ohio State. Give me Will Howard. Give me Jeremiah Smith. I'm gushing over this Ohio State team. I know it's really hard to go and play a third straight game where you blow someone out. So if I were to say a spread, I would take Texas. Getting 6 in this kind of advantage situation where they just had coming off back-to-back blowout wins, there's going to be some kind of letdown, but I just trust the Buckeyes defense and the offensive attack for the Buckeyes over Quinn Ewers. Golden's been phenomenal, but it's Quinn Ewers who's the question mark for me. And I just, it comes back to Steve Sarkisian making those mistakes. I made this comparison earlier in the season, and I hope Lane Kiffin's not listening, but I think Steve Sarkisian, Lane Kiffin, those are two similar coaches to me where they have these great master plans. But when it comes to final game execution, we've seen time and time again where they've made questionable decisions. I think Ryan Day is ready to get his. Jim Knowles has his defense fired up. I like the Buckeyes to win this game. Vaughn, split the difference, man.
Yeah, it's these 2 games in general are very tough for me to handicap because I'm biased on all sides. I had the preseason ticket on Ohio State before when the college football playoff came out. We talked about what team should we be betting on, and I said, I'm gonna split a unit on Texas, Penn State, and Notre Dame. So we're sitting here with all 4 of these teams, and you're asking me who I want to take, Brad. I should say I don't care, but I think Texas plus 6.5 is the right side here, and there's a couple of reasons why. Now, if Texas didn't let that second half meltdown happen against Arizona State, what would the spread be? We'd be looking more at a 2.5 to a 3.5 more than likely. So there's a bit of an overreaction there, in my opinion. And Ohio State has come out to great starts, but I don't think those teams that they played are going to have the matchup as well as Texas will with them, especially in the pass defense. Now, Texas had lapses at the running position. Ohio State's going to ground and pound too, but I think this Longhorns team, this defense in general, will keep Ohio State more in check than the other two teams have, Oregon and Tennessee, which isn't saying much, but I think it actually comes to fruition here. So I think both teams come out well scripted, gentlemen. The first quarter over is 10.5. I mean, there's no much more of a difference than a 12.5 or, maybe a 13.5 here, but I think that's worthy of an over bet here. And then maybe look at a live under in the game because I do think the second half defenses will lock in here because of possessions. But I like Texas plus a 6.5, Brad. I feel like it's a little bit of overreaction in the market. Ohio State jumping from plus 400 to plus 110 to win the Natty too. Bit of an overreaction as well. So, I think a lot of people are going to be excited to take this big number with Ohio State and think it's an easy bet, but Texas won't. And this is ramble, so I'm sorry. Last thing I'll add, I think it's important though. Texas missing those field goals changed their offensive approach entering this game. They will absolutely be going for it on fourth down. They will absolutely be more aggressive. And I think that is an over script as well, too. So why I say bet the live under, I think we might see a number in the 60s at one point in this game. But Texas will be very aggressive and probably the more aggressive team, Brad.
Vaughn. Another point to Steve Sarkisian doing things that make absolutely no sense. I don't know if the producer could put this up in post or something, but when he grabbed Bert Arvin's head and has this 6-minute conversation with him before the biggest kick of his life, what did he think that kid was going to do? Nick Saban dissected it and said something. He equates it to golf, right? He said, in that moment, you don't talk to him any different than it'd be any other kick because you don't want that kick to be different than any other kick you make all season. Yeah. Just like in golf, every shot is the same. No shot carries more weight than the other. That was weird to me, and it almost cost them the game. Man, thank you for bringing that up. I totally slipped my mind, but I was like, what are you doing? And listen, I had no Texas futures money or anything. I just felt bad for this kid because the amount of pressure he just put on him in that situation, in the national spotlight, having this extended conversation.
Most kicks in Texas history, too. I mean, this guy, when he's going up there, the announcers are even putting some pressure on him, talking about how historically great this guy has been. So, I mean, it's just kicking in college is weird, man. I mean, you see Kate, you work in the NFL, miss a 33-yarder in overtime, and, I hate him because I had a 3.5 in that game, and then the Bengals don't trust him. Then you go the next day, Missouri's kicker's banging a 51 and 56-yarder. Then you got Texas in the playoffs. So kicking is hard, all right? Don't be a kicker. Go play baseball. That's what you should tell your kids, all right?
Well, before we get into the ladders, I don't have a ladder, but I do want to let you guys know the NFC's number 1 seed is on the line this Sunday when the Vikings take on the Lions in Detroit. Coverage of the showdown that wraps up the regular season begins at 7 p.m. Eastern on NBC and Peacock.
As you all know by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up to BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE, and you'll get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code BETEDGE. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your first bet loses. Just make sure you use bonus code BETEDGE when you sign up. See BetMGM.com for terms. 21 plus only. U.S. promotional offers not available in New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona, 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts, 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa, 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only, subject to eligibility requirements. Rewards are non-withdrawable bonus bets that expire in 7 days in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code BETEDGE and get your $1,500 first bet offer today.
I haven't quite decided how I'm going to play this ladder section. And, I'm the kind of guy who I like to dissect the game for a really long time with the numbers. But I just really think that laddering Matthew Golden's a situation that I'm going to be down with. You look 149 against Arizona State, 162 against Georgia. Had some big games against, like, when they needed it, against Kentucky. Another big game against Texas A&M. Georgia again, the first time of the season when they were playing from a negative script. Isaiah Bond didn't look like he was close to 100%, not only just like physically, but timing, right? There are a lot of timing issues with Quinn Ewers. You go with the reliable guy and Golden, leading receiver on the team there. Maybe Quinn Ewers. Vaughn, I know you have something actionable, so if you want to go ahead and drop it for us.
Yeah, I do like the Math and Golden take. I mean, he looked awesome last week. And how upset would you have been if Jeremiah Smith didn't get the 150 and Golden finished on 149? Because I was watching the game, I'm like, that catch to Golden doesn't count towards his yardage at the end. And I'm like, he's finishing on 149. So yeah, I mean, that was a sweat. But I like Jeremiah Smith. I mean, Mr. Reliable, why stop? This is continued cashing for us. 100+ yards once again. It's down to plus 178 this week, down from plus 235 last week, down from plus 375 the week prior. So the books are protecting themselves against Jeremiah Smith. And I played $10 on his first touchdown the first two games. We're up $150. It's very tough to hit first touchdown bets in college football, but Jeremiah Smith is doing it. So I'm not going to stop doing it right now, guys. 100+ yards. First touchdown. I wouldn't talk you off 2+ touchdowns, but it's really just a situation where if it's not broke, don't fix it. Eric, do you have anything? Are you looking for anything in Penn State Notre Dame as well to ladder, since we don't have any props for that as we speak?
Yeah, we've got absolutely nothing in that game worthy of laddering. I would say I kind of think it'll be a more subdued script between these two teams. These are a couple of defense-oriented sort of programs that will keep that game, they will grind it out if you allow them to. So we'll see what happens with that. The one thing I would probably look at is Katron Allen's 4.5 receiving yards. Either he catches a few or he catches 0. So, I mean, if we got a good ladder on that, when that eventually comes to like maybe 25 plus, it's only at 4.5 yards. You could probably get 2-to-1 money on something like that. And if he generally goes way over. So I would look at 20-25 plus on a ladder for him. Like we said, we have nothing out. But on the other side of things, I love the Golden idea. First off, he's at 54.5 receiving yards at BetMGM. As discussed, he went over $140 each of the last 2 games. Yeah. And when they need to, he's the guy. And as I stated, I cannot believe they'll be in a position where they'll be salting the game away and just running Trey Wisner 35 times. I can't for the life of me picture that happening. I think it's either competitive or they're in a chase script here against Ohio State, which means Matthew Golden should get double-digit targets, which means it's just a matter of does he catch it? The opportunity, I believe, will be there. It's a matter of execution. At 120+ yards, he's at plus 650 for Golden. 110 is plus 475. 100 is plus 340. Those are pretty good marks. Yeah, considering what we're talking about and the frequency he did it. On the other side with Jeremiah Smith, dude, his regular line 77.5.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I'll take that.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Then, if you're looking at his plus money, like 100 plus is plus 185. I can just take the 77.5 at regular minus 115. That's just a regular odd, and save myself 23.5 yards, which is going to be a lot more likely. You're not getting good juice until you cross really 120 here, and they're capping it at 120 on DraftKings because they're petrified of Jeremiah Smith. That's still a plus 350, so that's still very possible.
Yeah, that's actually what it was the last game too, because I was looking at his lines pre-game, and it was almost the exact same thing we have set here. That's why I was saying at this point it's maybe like a first touchdown or the 2+ touchdown odds are the way to be playing him, because it's like they are capping him, but they haven't really capped Matthew Golden because he has the same exact line as Emeka Egbuka, and I just don't think that's correct. So yeah, I'm glad you brought it to my attention. I didn't even see Golden's line, but 54.5 seems like a steal. I like that.
Yeah, that's on BetMGM. BetMGM led. They had the first stuff out. So
yeah, the last 3 games, all the lines against Ohio State for the offense was were pretty low, right? Like Tennessee didn't cover anything, obviously. And then
Ooh.
Tez Johnson didn't cover his receiving yards, but Tez Johnson did get banged up. Evan Stewart got hurt in warm-up,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
Could this
He
be
had
a
a buck
game?
49 last game too. Evan
Yeah.
Stewart.
Yeah.
Nope, he didn't even play.
Could Ohio State and Texas be a game for plus 1750 where we could play the first quarter, both teams to score 10 points? Could we see an explosion in the first quarter of either of these games, actually, but primarily this one? No?
I don't think Texas scores 10 points in the first quarter if Ohio State scores 10 points.
Definitely
No
not in
smoking.
Penn State Notre Dame, I'd say.
Yeah, this is
I
more
don't see a lot
likely.
of
If we're
points
gonna put
happening in
money,
that game.
it's more likely to be this one.
That was one of the only long shots that I was looking at that was available so far, but I'll sprinkle it for $5.
Hey,
But
no one
yeah, just gonna
talked
get your
off of
take.
taking a long shot. And I want to say this, Vaughn. Listen, people talked about me crazy. They were in the streets saying, "No way, Brad just took Gunnar Stockton 225 plus passing yards at plus 650. He doesn't stand a chance. He almost got the plus 850."
Yeah, almost.
Crazier things have happened in these games, especially when you have two quarterbacks with wide receiver weapons who can stretch the field. That's what it's all about, right? Stretching the field. All you need is to basically break one tackle or beat somebody over the top. That's 7 points aside. Now you just need field goals on the opposite ends.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an exciting game either way. But I like the receiver angles we're looking at. I feel like that is the way to be approaching this game. The Ohio State running back ladders will be difficult to, probably play those. And I don't trust Texas running game, as Eric alluded to earlier. So I like what we're looking at here, gentlemen.
Yeah, let's get into the best bets. I'm Penn State is my best bet. I do have an additional bet, so I'll let you guys do your best bets, and then I'll give my additional bet.
Well, I'll lead us off since I have the worst record, right? But we have won 4 straight, including 2 last week, like I mentioned, guys. So the plan is en route. We're on our way to the airport to catch you guys at baggage claim. We're taking Penn State plus the 1.5, and then we're taking Texas, Ohio State first quarter over the 10.5. So as I alluded to, Penn State, I trust the quarterback position to get the ball down the field a little more for Drew Aller opposed to Riley Leonard. And I think that's the biggest factor because both offensive lines, both defense are going to show up at times in this game. And for Texas, Ohio State, these teams have been so explosive in the first quarter offensively. Special teams we saw from Texas. Defensively, they're making plays. I think that we can see at least 2 scores in Ohio State versus Texas in the first quarter. So those are my 2 picks to get to 11-13. Then we'll have 3 picks for the Natty to get to above 500. And we've completed the 8-game sweep comeback, gentlemen.
I love this vibe. I'm so about this vibe. Eric, what do you have for your best bet?
Yeah, I mentioned it a little bit earlier in the show, but I think you have to take the under position on Jeremiah Love, 58.5 rushing yards. Again, injury factor. He's been hurt since USC. He got hurt again last game. The previous game, against Georgia, the previous game, as we had discussed against Indiana, he only played half the game, didn't play the entire second half, and then he comes out short again. Yeah. The fact that we're even putting this out at 58.5 rushing yards, you have to take the under.
Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I absolutely love the Jeremiah Love play under and the Matthew Golden over. I think those are probably the 2 best plays we talked about today. And probably should be my best bets, honestly. I've given everything how much confidence I have in them over what I said today. But I think that us, talking about this stuff, obviously get these lines open will give us the best opportunity for the listeners and ourselves to make money. I think we're doing it with those 2 prop plays. I want to mention that. Brad, what you think?
Yeah, listen, I have one more bet. And, my these bowl games have been one of the most fun experience I've had. Almost a bet for every game, multiple bets.
You've been killing it, man.
I'm 42, 19 and 1. And we've hit multiple plus 400 or better bets so far this postseason. And I'm going to try one more time Bahamas Bowl, the Vacation Bowl. They already asked Chadwell if Liberty cares about this game. I do not think they do. I'm going with Buffalo -3. You can take money line. That's fine. Liberty has literally their 2 best players on offense in the portal, and Kane Salter and Quentin Cooley. That is their offense, right? They have like a dozen dudes in the portal with another like 6 guys injured. Chadwell already said no guys in the portal are playing in this game. Playing as a Buffalo team with A.J. Henderson, great running back, who is coming in scorching hot. motivation we talked about, which team's coming in on a losing streak or down, which team is losing players, or which team's coming in. They earned this 4 straight wins to the season. Buffalo taking the -3.
Love that. Yeah.
Sounds good.
I'm
yeah,
glad I'm with
I'm
you.
on that too.
The
Let's
record
ride.
speaks for itself, man. Let's go.
That's right. I'm also take AJ Henderson when I'm gonna dissect that line a little bit more. But anyway,
Before we get out of here, Brad, you didn't let the viewers know that Eric overtook you in the best bet section. How could you omit that?
Eric did overtake me, and I was heartbroken.
Oh well.
12-7 versus 11-7. I was just gonna let it skate by.
Eric's like, this was the whole plan, and I wasn't gonna brag about it.
You know, for Eric, it's a slow game, right? Like Eric knows. Eric knows. By the end of the season, he's gonna be best bet number 1.
Do we all win? We all win with 11-7, 12-7. As long as it's profit, that's all that matters, boys.
As long as profit, as long as we're having good times, as long as we're out giving out good bets. Everyone watching, thank you so much for Vaughn Delzale and Eric Froton. I'm Brad Thomas. Enjoy the game.